And so let's bring in our colleague, Katie Tur, who has been inside the courtroom for us and has come out. And Katie, tell us what it is like, describe the atmospheres. And here we're talking about this cross-examination, perhaps getting into too much detail, going too long, and whether or not the jury is bored. If you can watch the jury, tell us what you've seen.
It is so interesting being inside, because when you're reading it off that document, I got a sense that things were much different in the courtroom. They were more boisterous, they were more forceful. Todd Blanche is very quiet. He's very calm in his questioning, almost serene. Michael Cohen is very quiet as well. He almost seems meek, deflated. He's got a kind of a, sorry for the New York City noise, he's got kind of a, naturally, it's right next to the light.
It's okay. We can hear you, Katie. It's great.
A hangdog quality to him, just answering most of the time with yes, sir, no, sir, that's correct. He's not the Michael Cohen that anybody who knows him knows. And there was a striking moment earlier on in the morning when, this is after questioning between Blanche and Michael Cohen, back and forth, yes, sir, no, sir, that's correct, that sounds like me. Short answers from Michael Cohen, very, very calm. They played Michael Cohen's podcast, Mea Culpa, and in the podcast, he is yelling. He's screaming about how much he wants to see Donald Trump in prison and how it would make him feel so good. And the energy and the emotion and the force with which you hear his voice in this podcast is the exact opposite from the Michael Cohen that you are seeing on Stan. I looked over at the jury at this time, and most of them are just stone cold, just no reaction whatsoever on their faces. There were a couple of them where you could detect a slight smirk. For the most part, the jury is paying close attention. I haven't really noticed one instance where anybody seems to be nodding off or losing focus or attention. A couple times before the last break, they looked over the clock because I think it was nearing to a point where people might need some water or a snack, but they have been very closely attentive to the proceedings, going back and forth between Blanche and Michael Cohen. Another thing that struck me, ladies, when the jury walks in, they walk right by Donald Trump. They walk right by the table he's sitting. None of them look at him. The second they get in front of him, right in his line of sight, they all look down. Each one of them, one after the other. They make a point not to look at him, as if there's something almost, and I'm not them, so I can't, accurately say what they're feeling with any exact knowledge, but it almost seems like there's a certain intimidation quality just walking by the former president of the United States. In terms of the atmospherics of the room, beyond Blanche, beyond Cohen, Donald Trump walks in with all the normal swagger that Donald Trump always has. You've seen it, and you can imagine it accurately because we all know him so well at this point. He also walks in with quite a big entourage. Today it was Lauren Boebert, it was Matt Gaetz, Boris Epstein is always there. And there was something of it felt to me like a mean girl quality to their presence. They walk in stoic, stone-faced, but when they sat down, they looked around the room, they noticed George Conway, they started to snicker, everybody turned and they stared right at George Conway and then whispered among themselves. They did the same thing looking at Michael Cohen. You get the idea that Donald Trump bringing this crowd with him is not just a show of force for the cameras outside, but it's a show of force for the witness inside and potentially even the jury. Can you get under Michael Cohen's skin by not just showing him Donald Trump sitting at the defense stand, but all of his entourage with him, the lawmakers who have yelled at him in Congress, the potential VP candidates, Donald Trump's own family, former colleagues of his, Boris Epstein there, trying to see if anybody could knock him off his game. Michael Cohen, for his part, has not looked over at Donald Trump from what I can tell. He has stayed very focused. If he had gotten any coaching, and I know he's gotten a lot, about how to deal with Todd Blanche, he's doing it. I mean, he doesn't seem like he's somebody who isn't aware of the way that he should approach this testimony, isn't aware of how he should say yes. There were a couple instances where he got into it with Blanche, but even those were not high-level intensity. In terms of the quality of the argument from the defense team, I'm not a lawyer. I haven't argued a case in front of a court. I don't know juries intimately. But as a person who's pretty steeped in this case and pretty steeped in the events surrounding it, I find it hard to follow a lot of the time. And if I'm finding it hard to follow, I wonder if the jury is finding it hard to follow as well. I think the overarching theme for the defense is really just to try and poke holes in Michael Cohen's credibility, and not just poke holes, to totally diminish it, to paint him as somebody who never wants to take responsibility, who's always looking for someone to blame when he gets in trouble. We heard that over and over again. Michael Cohen, you shift responsibility. He admitted he did so. You never want to say when you're wrong. Even when you were indicted, you felt it was unfair, hoping to convince the jury that this is a guy, when he does something wrong, is looking for somebody else to blame. And in this case, he's looking right at the former president, who, you know, was once the guy he looked up to and is now the guy who spurned him.
Katie, as you well know, there are different ways to deliver a knockout punch, and I'll let the lawyers here disagree with me, but definitely when you have arguably the most important witness on the stand, you want to deliver something at least approximating a knockout punch. Now, it might not be John Grisham worthy. It might not be people screaming. It might not be people who are sitting in the courtroom who suddenly have a collective gasp because of what they just heard. Was there any moment at all in what you've heard, and you've been sitting there all morning?
No, I haven't heard anything like that. But I don't think you're going to get that from this case. I haven't seen any interaction with the lawyers, with Michael Cohen, the lawyers between each other. Even the objections are quiet. You know, the judge is quiet. It's a very, very calm room. Yeah, you could argue it's tense, but it is very calm. And if there's going to be a John Grisham knockout punch, I don't know if it's going to be so apparent. At least it hasn't been to me so far. And again, I've only been here for a few hours today.
And Katie, you know, you say you're not a lawyer, but you know Donald Trump so well and all of these players so well. And just the atmospherics, as you describe them. Danny Savalas was just sharing with us that as a defense lawyer, he felt that that Todd Blanche was going over and over it too much, that you don't have to throw everything in and follow every thread. And one of the threads that he's been following is, you know, didn't you tell your daughter that you thought you could be Attorney General or White House Chief of Staff or this job or that job? And it seemed to me that going into his texts with his daughter, those confidential texts, might make some jurors uncomfortable, that was, you know, too much, because he's already established that he was, you know, not telling the truth when he said he didn't want a job in the White House. But at one point, he's also saying, no, I didn't want to be the deputy counsel, White House counsel. I wanted to be personal lawyer to the president, which is the job that he eventually did get, as you pointed out. So it seems as though that may be overkill.
It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell how the jury's taking it. And again, they're paying attention. I've seen some, you know, very minor reaction, mostly, you know, when that podcast was playing, or names that Michael Cohen has called Donald Trump are brought up. But other than that, there hasn't been a lot of reaction, visible reaction from the jury. A lot of them are taking notes. They are paying close attention. And I've had enough conversations now with Andrew Weissman and Lisa Rubin and Danny Savalas and all of our fantastic legal analysts to know that they will say that it's hard to predict how a jury, which way a jury is going to go. They will at times point out one juror, and, you know, there are people in the room pointing out individual jurors saying, I think that person is X or that person is Y. And often they're proven wrong by what happens in deliberations. So again, I mean, it's hard to tell. But as somebody who's steeped in this case personally, I've done a lot of reading about it. I've done a lot of studying about it. I obviously cover it with you ladies every single day. I was there covering the campaign during the period that is at the core of this case. I know the details of what was happening at the time. A lot of these arguments can be hard for me to follow, so I'm just not clear what the jury is getting out of the minutia of what Todd Blanche is trying to argue, other than just really emphasizing that Michael Cohen is a man who was out for himself. Michael Cohen is a man who Todd Blanche is arguing cannot be trusted, who lies, and when he's caught doing something wrong, tries to shift the blame. And this time, he's shifting the blame to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump didn't do right by him, didn't, in this argument that you're hearing right now, didn't take him to the White House.
And didn't give him a bonus. So, well, Katie, come on back.
Yeah.
The chair is right here for you. We really want to see you, but it's great insights to have you in the courtroom. Thank you.
Packed a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, Chris Jansing. So I took your I heeded your good deed the other day, and I have some sustenance. I'm going to go back in just for a couple minutes, but then I'll see you guys up there.
That's the secret to your energy,
very soon.
Obviously.
We'll see you back here, Katie. Thank you.